Power, skill, excitement. You'll see these and more at the 77th North American Chinese Invitational Volleyball Tournament set for Labor Day weekend 2022. But the action will take place 45 miles southwest in Providence, Rhode Island. But why Providence?
Because the tournament is so huge now. When I first was a spectator as a young boy in Chinatown, the tournament was limited to maybe 8 to 12 teams. They were all men. They could be done in one Saturday. That's no longer true. When you have 160, 70 teams between men and women's, there are bigger challenges involved. There's just a lot of logistical issues that goes into running a tournament for 9-man on Labor Day these days.
The Providence Convention Center solves the logistical issues. With over 100,000 square feet of space, it can hold over 22 plus volleyball courts. In addition, the 22,000 square foot grand ballroom will be perfect for a banquet dinner that can house up to 2,300 people.
Providence plays a big role in the history of 9-man volleyball. It's reported in 1937, around that time, that the first volleyball tournament between the laundrymen in the United States took place between teams from Providence and Boston because it was right on the train line.
At the time, Providence had its own Chinatown, resulting from anti-Chinese bias and the 1882 Exclusion Act that created a separate, segregated community in the city.
Providence Chinatown started in a place called Burrell Street. There was a group of people there, probably resettled after the completion of the Transcontinental Railway. They came to Providence in part because it was the beginning of a boom time for Providence. It became a real industrial powerhouse. And within 15, 20 years, that group had grown to a few hundred people. And they were concentrated in this area, Burrell Street, and ultimately in Empire Street, which became known as the Chinatown in Providence.
This small but vibrant community became a safe haven for new immigrants.
In Providence, what we did was when a new relative came over from China, the word would go out and we would find a place for them to stay. We would donate furniture and clothes to them. We would teach them skills and get them employment, help their kids enroll in school.
In the neighborhood of that location, there were 2 churches, both of whom serviced immigrant communities by teaching them English and hoping to, enroll them in the church.
We were very active in Beneficent Congregational Church, which is in downtown Providence at the junction of Empire Street and Bossett Street. We were probably the first Chinese family there, and so I was probably 10 at the time. We had a pastor, his name was Reverend Arthur E. Wilson, and so he made it his duty to go and visit all of the Chinese families. Those families, he got to attend our church. So we were very active. We had a children's choir, we had a youth choir.
I am one of the few younger Chinese families that lived in Providence back in the early 40s. My grandfather had a laundry in Providence. I lived with my grandfather. My uncle was also worked for my grandfather, and my father couldn't come at that time. And when the United States wound up in the war, there was no immigrants coming to America. So it wasn't until after the war, until 1950, before my father came to America. So I didn't know my father until I was 10 years old. And then a few years later, my father decided that he wanted to go into business for himself. And that's when we moved to North Providence, and he opened a laundry in North Providence. And I worked there for about 5 years, and then my Dad decided that the laundry business was not doing that well, and he wanted to get into the restaurant business. Well, I had been working in the restaurant business since I was 13, 14 years old, and I said, I really don't want to get into that, but the good son decided that, yes, I will help you in the restaurant business. So I wound up in the restaurant business, and we worked that for 25 years.
Those who grew up in Providence's Chinatown remember a supportive, tight-knit community.
We were poor, but nobody told us, and we never suffered, or we always had food and everything. The neighbors were wonderful. We looked out for each other. We all walked to school. We always felt a small sense of community, and we looked out for each other.
The uncle, who my father traveled with from China, had a place in Chinatown. We used to go there to pick up bok choy. Eventually, he, along with other individuals, opened up a restaurant in Providence, Rhode Island, downtown Providence, and that was approximately 1938.
The Chinese here were industrious as they were everywhere. By and large, people were occupied during the week, and Sundays was the day of rest. So for the locals, Providence was the nearest cluster, so you could go there and know that there were people who were speaking your language.
They not only spoke the same language, they played a new kind of volleyball.
The volleyball connection actually does come out of a growing presence of young male immigrants come to Rhode Island in the late 30s, early 40s. They were looking for something to do, so the natural outlet was with athletic endeavors, and I think it was a natural for this to become, one of the pathways for engagement up and down the coast, and for people of that age and language background to connect with each other.
For years, nine-man volleyball helped connect the people in Providence's Chinatown. But by 1970, that connection was lost when Chinatown disappeared.
Chinatown disappeared because of urban renewal and stricter zoning and building codes. The buildings were old, they were fire traps.
It was neglected. There was no help in developing the Chinatown. I don't think there was any interest in keeping the Chinatown. Could there have been help, assistance? Yes, but I think what it is the Asian community are very proud, and they wouldn't ask for the help.
There was a disbursement of people to the suburbs, and the families, they all, made a very good living working at the restaurant, and they moved out to Warwick and to different sections of Providence.
But moving out of Chinatown did not mean forgetting about nine-man.
And I think one of the things that the volleyball leagues highlight is that there was an interaction among people all up and down the East Coast. Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, Boston. They all had Chinatowns, and they all connected to each other, in part because they were all descended from places largely in Huisan, and the common language and these common ancestral connections kept them together.
Though its Chinatown no longer exists, there's good reason for holding the 2022 nine-man tournament in Providence.
We can use this tournament as a way to help bridge the history, to bring back the history, to show the significance of Providence as a settlement for Chinese people many, many years ago. And even though it's lost, I think it's very important to recognize that it was at one time a center of Chinese social interaction.
Over Labor Day weekend 2022, Providence's Chinatown will be remembered. The cultural and historical heart of the city's Chinese community will, for a brief but important time, beat again. All because of the tournament Providence helped establish more than 80 years ago.